She sent the message at 9:42 in the morning. "This is a parents-only event. Thank you for understanding." No greeting, no explanation, just that line. Polished, formal, cold, like I was some stranger who'd RSVP'd to the wrong address. My fingers hovered over the phone for a long time before I set it down, still unsure what had just happened. The event was my granddaughter's school play. 3rd grade. Sarah had been working on her lines for weeks, and I'd promised her I'd be there. Front row, if possible. She asked me to bring the scarf I knitted for her last winter, the one with the lavender stripes. She said it was her lucky scarf. And then, this message. From Daniela, my daughter-in-law. My son Ryan didn't write it. He never does. He lets her handle the uncomfortable things, like he used to call them when he was a boy. Even now, I can picture how he'd avoid my eyes, like when he lied about breaking his sister's ceramic bunny. He was 6 then. 39 now. Some habits survive decades. I sat back on the kitchen bench, where the sunlight always falls at this time of morning. The kettle had already clicked off, forgotten. My mug sat empty. I looked out the window, past the bird feeder, at the street lined with familiar trees. Everything outside was exactly the same. But inside, something shifted. You raise a man. You hold his hand through fevers, through heartbreaks, through exams and college applications. You sell off your husband's old truck to help with his first down payment. You watch his child being born, and you promise yourself, "I'll never let her feel unloved." And then, one morning, you're told, "This is not your place." I didn't answer Daniela's message. I didn't trust my fingers not to shake. Instead, I reached for my notebook, the one I kept in the drawer under the recipe books. Not the calendar kind, a real notebook, handwritten. I used it to track birthdays, medicines, grocery lists, and little things. Like the check I wrote last year to help Ryan and Daniela remodel their kitchen. Or the monthly payments I'd been sending toward Sarah's private school fees. Or the flight tickets I booked for their vacation last spring, because things were tight. They weren't tight enough to keep me from being cut out of my granddaughter's school play, though. I flipped through the pages. Ink smudges. My own cursive, tighter each year. 47 entries under Ryan and Daniela, not counting groceries and gifts. I once told myself that helping them brought me joy, that I was investing in family, that money was just a tool. But somewhere along the way, I stopped being a mother and became a sponsor. And now, not even that. The doorbell rang. I startled. Nobody rings my doorbell on a Wednesday, not unless it's a delivery. I opened the door and found Sarah, alone. She wore the scarf. "Grandma," she said, breathless. "We just got to school, but I forgot my script. Can you bring it before lunch?" My heart thudded, painfully relieved. "I thought I wasn't allowed," I said gently, brushing a hair from her forehead. "Why not?" She blinked. "Daddy said you might be busy today." "But I told him you wouldn't miss it." I stood there a moment. The air between us felt heavy. "Of course I'll bring it," I said, kissing her cheek. And I would. I'd bring the script. I'd sit in that auditorium if I had to stand in the back by the janitor's closet. I'd watch her say her lines in that lavender scarf, the one I knit while waiting for blood work results I never told anyone about. And I'd wait. Because this wasn't over. Not yet. I found the script exactly where I thought it would be. Under the cushion of the armchair in the den. Folded, a little creased, with a smudge of peanut butter in the corner. Sarah had been reciting it to me last weekend while we had sandwiches and tea. She'd stood on that very chair declaring, "I am the wind," with such pride it made me laugh out loud. As I slipped the pages into a manila envelope, I noticed the old clock above the mantel ticking just a bit off rhythm. It always did that when the humidity changed. It was 10:14. If I left now, I'd make it in time to catch the start of the school event. If they let me in. That "if" was heavier than the envelope in my hands. I changed my sweater, the one Daniela once called quaint, and brushed my hair back into the style I'd worn since before Ryan was born. Then I paused by the door, keys in one hand, the scarf on my shoulder. I'd bring it anyway, even though Sarah had been wearing it earlier. Just in case. The school hadn't changed since Ryan went there. Same red bricks, same peeling playground fence. The parking lot was full, mostly SUVs and glossy sedans. I parked my old Honda between a BMW and something I didn't recognize. A car with a screen where the dashboard should be. A young woman in a headset met me at the front entrance, her clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. "Are you a parent?" she asked, her voice polite but distant. "I'm a grandmother," I said. "Martha Henley." "I'm here for Sarah Henley." She scanned her list. I watched her finger move down the column, then stop, then retreat. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Henley," she said, not meeting my eyes. "We were instructed to admit parents only." Instructed. Not school policy. Not due to space. Just, someone told her no. I nodded, slowly. "Sarah left her script at my house," I said, holding out the envelope. She hesitated, then took it. "I'll make sure she gets it." I didn't leave. Instead, I walked around the side of the building, past the rusted bike racks and the side entrance that had always been left unlocked in my day. It wasn't now. But the windows were open. Through the glass, I saw the assembly hall. Folding chairs lined up. Paper cutout trees on stage. Children rustling backstage in costume. Parents, younger than me, mostly, chatting and sipping coffee from travel mugs. In the second row sat Ryan and Daniela. He wore a blazer I'd bought him 2 Christmases ago. She wore her usual gloss. Perfect hair, polished heels, the kind of woman who always smelled faintly like hotel soap. She laughed at something someone said. He smiled. Not once did they look around. Not once did Ryan glance toward the entrance. I stood there until the lights dimmed. Then I walked back to my car, slower than when I'd arrived. I didn't cry. I'd cried years ago, the first time Daniela corrected me in front of guests. "Actually, Martha, Sarah isn't allowed to eat that much sugar. We're doing clean eating now." It was a piece of birthday cake for a 6-year-old. I'd cried when they forgot to invite me to the school's grandparents' luncheon and told me after the fact, "Oh, we assumed you had other plans." But not today. Today I drove straight home, opened my notebook, and turned to a blank page. At the top I wrote, "They don't see me." And under it, "Not at birthdays, not at performances, not in their home unless to babysit. Not at the table when they make decisions." Then I turned to the back of the notebook where I kept financial notes. I'd made payments toward their mortgage last year. 3 checks, $2,500 each. Helped cover Sarah's after-school tutoring too. Plus the new fridge Daniela loved that mysteriously showed up in their Instagram story before they thanked me in person. I traced my finger down the list. For years, I told myself this was generosity. That love meant giving, even when it wasn't noticed. But standing outside that school window today, I realized I'd given them permission to forget me. Quiet permission. The kind that's easy to ignore. That would change. Not with shouting, not with scenes. But I would make sure they remembered me. Even if I had to start with myself. That night, I slept poorly. Not because I was upset. Not in the usual way, at least. No, what kept me awake was a quiet alertness. Like a bell had rung somewhere deep in my chest, and now I was just listening. I got up before dawn, made coffee, opened the curtains. The silence in the house was familiar. Not lonely, just mine. I'd lived alone for 18 years. First as a widow, then as the kind of mother who learns not to expect visits without a calendar reminder.
Then as a woman who stops counting how many holidays she spends in her own kitchen while her son's family eats somewhere else. I pulled out my file box, the one I kept tucked behind the linens in the hall closet. Inside were neatly labeled envelopes: mortgage help, school support, emergencies, each with dates, each with copies of checks, notes from Ryan, sometimes scribbled on the backs of receipts. Thanks again, Mom. This means so much. We'll pay you back as soon as we can. They never did. Not once. Not even partially. I don't say that with bitterness, just with the clarity of someone who's finally stopped pretending. It's strange. When you're young, you think clarity comes like a lightning bolt, but at my age, it comes like water, slow, steady, soaking everything. I sat down at the table and made a list, not of what I'd given, that was already documented, but of what I'd let go. My seat at the table, my voice in their lives, my presence at events, my role as a grandmother, not a helper. It's not that they were cruel. Daniela never raised her voice to me. Ryan never said a word that was directly hurtful. But the hurt wasn't in words. It was in silences, in omissions, in things not said, not offered, not remembered. Last Thanksgiving, I brought my cranberry tart, the one Ryan used to request every year. Daniela had made a different dessert already. She thanked me and then quietly left it in the garage fridge. I found it there the next day, untouched. "Too many sweets," she said, when I asked. Sarah was the only one who asked for it. That morning, after my coffee, I called the bank. "Good morning, Mrs. Henley," the voice said on the line. "How can we assist you today?" "I'd like to review all automatic payments and transfers from my accounts," I said, firm and polite. A pause. "Certainly. Would you like us to email a summary?" "No," I said. "I'd like to come in." At the branch, they offered me tea. I declined. I wanted my hands free for the documents. The young advisor, Marcus, tapped at his keyboard and pulled up a spreadsheet. "You have several recurring transfers," he said, scrolling. "Monthly to Ryan Henley, quarterly to Sarah's school, occasional vendor payments labeled gift, possibly reimbursements?" "No," I said. "Just gifts." He hesitated. "Would you like to make any changes?" "Yes," I said. "I'd like to suspend all recurring transfers effective immediately." He blinked. "All of them?" "All of them," I repeated. "And I'd like to revoke the financial authorization Ryan Henley has on my secondary account." More blinking. "Of course, Mrs. Henley. I'll need your signature on these forms." I signed. It was the first time in years I felt like I was writing my own name for myself. "Anything else?" Marcus asked. I considered. "Yes," I said. "I'd like to open a separate account, in my name only, and I'd like to designate Sarah Henley as the beneficiary, not her parents, just her." He nodded, typing again. "A trust or a simple beneficiary arrangement?" "A trust," I said. Sarah didn't need to know now, but one day she would. One day, when she was older and looking for a kind of love that didn't ask for performance or polish or permission, she'd know someone was always watching and remembering. By the time I got home, the air had turned sharp. Autumn was thick in the trees. I raked leaves, slow and methodical, not because the yard needed it, but because my mind did. Halfway through the pile, my phone buzzed. A message from Daniela. "Hi, Martha. Just a reminder. Ryan's birthday dinner is this Saturday. We're keeping it small. Just some close friends and parents. Hope you understand." Another line drawn. Another door closed softly, as if that made it kinder. I didn't reply. Instead, I turned off the phone and went back to the leaves. Red, gold, brown. Layers falling one over the other, not in anger, but in nature. Some things fall. Some things are cleared. And some things, finally, are left behind. I didn't go to the dinner. Of course I didn't. I baked a pear tart that day. Not because anyone was coming over, but because I hadn't made one in years. I used to make them every fall, back when Ryan would bring his school friends around and the kitchen would smell like cinnamon for hours. The habit had faded, like so many others, replaced by store-bought pies and polite thank yous over text. But that Saturday, I made it just for me, from scratch. I even used the old ceramic pie dish, the one with the chip on the edge that Ryan once called the mouth. The house smelled the way it used to when people came in hungry. And then, Sarah called. "Grandma?" she whispered. "Are you coming?" It caught me off guard. "To what, darling?" "Daddy's birthday. You always come." I sat down at the kitchen table, wiping flour off my fingers. "I wasn't invited," I said gently. A pause on the other end. "But it's just a small thing," she said, like she was repeating something someone had told her. "Just parents and friends." I didn't say anything. She continued, her voice smaller. "But I thought you were a parent too." That's when my chest tightened. Not because she was wrong, but because she was so right, and no one had explained that to her. "I was," I said quietly. "I am. But sometimes grown-ups forget who built the house they're living in." She didn't answer right away. I imagined her in the hallway, clutching the phone, unsure if she should have called. "Are you mad?" she finally asked. "No," I said. "Not at you." And I wasn't. Not at Sarah. Never at Sarah. I sent her home with a slice of tart the next day, wrapped in wax paper tucked inside the lunchbox she sometimes brought when she stayed over. I didn't hear anything back. Not from Ryan, not from Daniela. But I knew she got it. The paper came back folded carefully. No crumbs. On Monday, I got a letter in the mail. From the school. It was a thank you note. "Thank you for your generous donation to the Reading Garden Fund." It had a picture of children holding books under a tree. I hadn't made that donation. My checkbook was in my kitchen drawer. Untouched. The signature on the donation was mine, but not in my hand. I knew Ryan had access to one of my secondary accounts, the one I used years ago to help him with the down payment on their house. I never officially revoked his access. It hadn't occurred to me to do so until now. I drove to the bank that afternoon. Marcus, the advisor, looked startled to see me again. "There's a donation listed from my account," I said calmly. $500, Reading Garden Fund. I didn't authorize it." He tapped at his keyboard, frowning. "It was processed through the shared access, authorized by Ryan Henley." I nodded. "I'd like a written record of all activity from that account for the last 2 years, and I want it closed." Marcus hesitated. "We'll need some signatures, and we'll need to notify—" "I don't need him notified of anything," I said. "I'm the account holder. The money is mine." Another pause, then a quiet, "Yes, Mrs. Henley." By the time I left the branch, it was raining. Not hard, just the kind of drizzle that softened the corners of everything. I didn't have an umbrella. I didn't need one. I let the rain touch my face, cold and clean. Let Ryan explain to the school why the donation was rescinded. Let Daniela explain to her parents-only guest list why Sarah had questions no one wanted to answer. Let them both learn that I was no longer the soft background character in their lives. I was still here, still whole, and still capable of walking away. When I got home, I sat by the window with a blanket around my shoulders and the pie dish drying in the rack beside the sink. I thought about the word parent, how it doesn't expire with age, how it doesn't disappear just because someone else calls themselves the head of the table. I raised a man. I fed him, taught him, held him during fevers. I stood in auditoriums, applauded his plays, sat through his college graduation in the blistering sun. He was once small enough to rest his head on my chest and cry about a scraped knee. And now, he signs my name to checks I didn't write. Parenthood doesn't come with conditions, but respect does. And if I wasn't going to be given it freely anymore, I would take something back instead. Not to hurt them, just to remember myself. 2 days later, I found Sarah sitting on my porch step, her school backpack beside her and her shoelaces untied. She wasn't expected. She didn't knock, just sat there like it was her natural place in the world. "Does your mother know you're here?" I asked, opening the screen door. She shrugged. "She thinks I'm at Ellie's house. I walked here after school. It's 1.5 miles from her school to my house. She's 9. I didn't ask why. I just opened the door wider. Inside, she went straight to the kitchen, like always, and pulled out the wooden stool. Same one Ryan used to sit on when he was little, swinging his legs while I made grilled cheese. Some things skip a generation. "Grandma," she said, "can I ask you something?" "Always." Her fingers traced the rim of her glass of milk. "Why did Daddy say you didn't want to come to his birthday dinner?" My hands stopped moving. I'd just set a plate of buttered toast in front of her. I sat down. "Is that what he said?" She nodded. "And I told Ellie it wasn't true, because I asked you, and you said you weren't invited." I breathed slowly, watching her face. Her jaw had that stubborn tilt I knew from long ago. "You're right," I said. "I wasn't invited, and I didn't say anything to your father because I wanted to give him a chance to fix it." "Did he?" "No." Sarah chewed in silence, then asked, "Did you do something bad?" That question hurt more than anything else had. "No, sweetheart," I said gently. Sometimes grown-ups make choices that have nothing to do with what's right or fair. They just convince themselves it's easier. Easier to forget someone? Easier to pretend someone doesn't matter, I said. If it makes things smoother in their world. She didn't speak again for a while. Just ate, slow and deliberate, the way kids do when their minds are somewhere else. When she was finished, she reached into her backpack and pulled out a sheet of paper. It was a drawing, crayons, bold and clumsy. Me and her sitting under the apple tree in my yard, cups of tea between us. A banner hung above. Grandma's house, my favorite place. "I made this," she said, "but Mom said we had to give something else to the teacher, something more appropriate." I took the paper from her and smoothed it out. "It's perfect," I said. "Absolutely perfect." Sarah stayed for an hour, long enough to color, read half a book, and ask if she could borrow my scarf just for a few days. I let her. After she left, I stood in the hallway holding that drawing. So much of my life had been spent waiting to be seen. By my son, by his wife, by the people they surrounded themselves with. But this child, she saw me, In a way, her father hadn't for years. That evening, I sat at the dining table with my old legal folder. It still had my original will in it, yellowed at the corners. I'd made it right after Edward died. It named Ryan as my sole heir. He was my only child. It had seemed obvious. But obvious isn't always right. I made a list of what needed changing, not out of revenge, not even to make a point, just for clarity, for truth. Sarah deserved more than stories about a grandmother who used to be around. She deserved something that said, I was here. I mattered. And I chose you. I called my lawyer's office the next morning, the same man who helped us with Edward's estate. His secretary still remembered me. We'll schedule you for Thursday morning, she said. Will that work? It will, I said. She paused. Everything all right, Mrs. Henley? I think it will be, I answered. That night, I dreamed of my old classroom, rows of desks, the smell of chalk and pencil shavings. I used to tell my students, you don't let someone else write your name at the top of your paper. It was time I listened to my own advice. The lawyer's office hadn't changed much in 20 years. Same dark wood paneling, same leather chairs that squeaked when you sat down. Even the same bowl of hard candy on the receptionist's desk. Peppermints, half unwrapped by time. Alan Berkman was older, of course. A little thinner at the top, a little thicker through the middle. But his handshake was still firm, and his voice still had that lawyer's mix of cheer and caution. Well now, Martha, he said, adjusting his glasses. It's been a while? Yes, I said. Too long. He studied my face for a moment. And what brings you in today? I want to update my will, I said simply. He gave a slight nod, respectful. Of course. Any changes in assets? No, not really. I paused. Only in clarity. That made him smile, faintly. All right, let's talk through it. We spent the next hour going over everything. The house, my savings, the remaining investment accounts, the vintage coin collection Edward had started and that Ryan never showed any interest in. I'd kept them all these years. Not for the money, but for the memory. Do you still want Ryan listed as primary heir? Alan asked, fingers poised on the keyboard. No, I said. I want my granddaughter, Sarah Henley, as the primary. I want everything to go to her through a trust that she can access when she turns 25. And until then, I'd like to designate a trustee. Alan raised an eyebrow. Would that be Ryan? No, I said. That would be me. And if I'm gone before she comes of age, I want the trustee to be Mr. Leonard Ashe, my neighbor. Leonard? Alan repeated, surprised. He's known Sarah since she was born. He's honest. He's never once asked me for a thing. Alan nodded slowly. Understood. He typed in silence for a while, only asking a few more questions. I answered them all. When he printed the draft and handed it to me, it felt like a physical shift, like the gravity in the room had changed. I'd always thought of legacy as something lofty, but now I saw it as something far simpler. It wasn't about money or property. It was about what kind of trace you leave in someone's heart. Before I left, Alan looked at me and said gently, "You're sure about this?" I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Walking out of that office, I felt taller, not proud, not righteous, just rooted, like a woman who had finally stopped waiting to be asked. That evening, I got a phone call. It was Ryan. I hadn't spoken to him since before his birthday. He sounded distracted, or maybe rushed. "Hey, Mom," he said. "I've been meaning to call. Things have just been hectic." "They usually are," I replied calmly. He hesitated. "Listen, I was wondering if you'd be available next weekend to watch Sarah. Daniela's sister is getting married out of town, and kids aren't invited." I smiled, though he couldn't see it. So, it's a parents-only event? A pause. Yeah, he said. I mean, well, yes, just adults. I see, I said. There was a long silence. Then he added, it's short notice, I know, but we figured you might have time. I could hear it in his voice, the old assumption that I would say yes, that I would always say yes. Ryan, I said, I won't be available next weekend. Another pause. Oh, everything okay? Yes, I said. Just busy. He laughed lightly. Busy? What's got you so tied up? Just some long overdue decisions, I said. I'm doing a bit of reorganizing. He didn't respond right away. Well, okay, he said eventually. We'll figure something else out. I'm sure you will, I said. After we hung up, I sat down at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and watched the light change across the floor. That same strip of late sun always landing just beneath the window. I didn't feel triumphant, just peaceful, like someone who had finally stepped out of the waiting room. The Saturday I wasn't available turned out to be beautiful. Crisp air, sunlight through the sycamores, that kind of clean autumn quiet that makes you feel like the whole town is holding its breath. I woke early, not for anyone else, just because I wanted to. I made a small breakfast, took my time with the newspaper, then went to the back garden with my pruning shears. The hydrangeas were leggy. It was time they were trimmed. At 11, I saw Sarah's face peering through the slats of the back gate. I opened it before she knocked. You're not out of town? She asked. No, I said. Why would I be? Daddy said you were on a trip. I nodded slowly. That's one way to put it. She stood there, holding a tote bag, wearing a jacket that was too light for the weather and sneakers with mismatched socks. She looked, in that moment, not like a little girl, but someone on the verge of realizing something they can't quite name yet. I brought my book, she said, lifting the bag. Then you'd better come in. We spent the afternoon curled up on the couch, reading Charlotte's Web. She read aloud, strong voice, even if she stumbled over the longer words. I listened, corrected gently, and offered slices of apple between chapters. No one called. No one checked if she was with me. I thought about that while she read about friendship and barns and endings. I thought about how care is supposed to look, not just love, but attention. At 5, I called her father. He answered on the third ring. I could hear music and laughter in the background, a reception, no doubt. Ryan, I said calmly, Sarah's with me. A pause. Oh, he said. We figured she was still with Ellie. I don't believe she ever went there. Another pause. Okay, well, thanks for letting me know. I assume you'll be by to pick her up this evening? Actually, he said, and I heard the hesitation. We're staying overnight. Daniela's sister booked a block of rooms. We weren't planning to come back until tomorrow. Then I'll see her in the morning, I said, and hung up. Sarah looked at me from the couch. Am I in trouble? No, sweetheart, I said. Not with me. That evening, we made soup together. Simple, with potatoes and carrots and biscuits from scratch. She set the table very carefully. I poured her a small glass of apple cider and pretended it was champagne. We toasted. To grandmothers, she said shyly, and to girls who know where to go when the adults forget what matters. She beamed. Later, after her bath, she asked if she could sleep in the guest room. Of course, I said. You know the sheets are clean, the blankets under the pillow. She paused in the hallway. I wish this was my real house. I didn't know what to say, so I knelt down, looked her in the eyes, and said what I could. It's your real home whenever you need it." She hugged me so tightly, my ribs ached. That night, I stayed up late, folding laundry and listening to the silence. Not lonely, just full. I wrote a note in my notebook before bed. She came to me without invitation. That means more than anything I've given. In the morning, Ryan knocked at the door. It was almost 9. He looked tired, rumpled shirt, hair still damp from a rushed shower. Sarah was finishing her cereal. He didn't come in, just stood at the door, half sheepish. "Thanks," he said, "for keeping her." "She came on her own," I replied. "Right," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "She said she missed you. She always can." Another silence. "I owe you one," he said. "No," I said. "You owe her." Then I closed the door. Not hard, not in anger, but with finality. I wasn't locking anyone out. I was just starting to keep the inside for myself. Monday morning started like any other. Quiet house, one tea bag left in the jar, a radio voice humming about local weather. I watered the fern by the window and thought about how much of life in the end is just tending. Plants, memories, boundaries. At 10, I had my meeting at the bank. Marcus greeted me with his usual professional smile, but this time, there was something else behind it. A kind of alertness, not nerves, exactly. Just the sense that he knew this visit mattered more than most. "I've got the paperwork ready," he said, leading me to his desk. "Account closures, new trust confirmations, and the changes to your beneficiary list." I nodded. He laid out the documents in a neat row. "All you need to do is sign here and here." My hand didn't tremble. Not once. When I was finished, he said, "There's also something I thought you should see." He turned his screen slightly toward me. "Last week, someone tried to log into one of your legacy accounts, the ones we already suspended. The system flagged it." "Who?" He hesitated. "It was done under your son's credentials. It was blocked, of course. But we thought you should know." I did know. Not the technical part, but the shape of it. Ryan had never stolen from me, but he had taken, through silence, through assumption, through slow erosion. And when I finally closed the faucet, he came looking for the handle. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "Please add a full access restriction, no third-party inquiries. And I'd like a printed confirmation of that." Marcus nodded and printed the form. "Anything else I can help with?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Do you know if your notary is in today?" "She is. Did you need something notarized?" I brought a letter. I opened my bag and pulled out an envelope, handwritten, dated, with my signature across the seal. It wasn't a will, just a statement. One that I wanted kept with my file, officially. He read the outside and gave a small, respectful nod. "I'll take care of it personally." By the time I left, the air had shifted, cooler, wind picking up. A woman outside was wrestling with an umbrella, cursing under her breath. I smiled as I passed her. Not unkindly, just knowingly. Some storms don't come with rain. Back home, the phone rang before I'd taken off my coat. It was Daniela. "Martha," she said too brightly. "Hi, just checking in." I waited. "How are things?" she added. "I'm fine." Another pause. "So, Ryan mentioned you've been making some changes." He'd be right. "Well," she laughed lightly, "I suppose it's that time in life. Re-evaluating, simplifying." "Or clarifying," I said. She didn't respond. Then, "Is everything okay between you and Ryan? He's been a little distracted lately." "I imagine so." "Well," she continued, the mask starting to slip. "It's just, if there's anything we should talk about, I think it's better to be open. Families thrive on communication. I sat down. Daniela, I said slowly, I don't think you want communication. I think you want quiet cooperation. Martha, you've made it very clear what kind of role I'm allowed to play in your world. I'm simply choosing not to play it anymore. Long pause. I see. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I'm glad. Click. She hung up. I sat there a moment longer. The living room looked the same, doily on the armrest, clock ticking unevenly, sunlight just reaching the floor. But I felt like I was sitting in a new country, one where I finally spoke the native language. Later that evening, I pulled out my sewing kit. Sarah had asked me months ago to help her start a quilt, just a little one for her dolls. We never got to it. Life, as they say, got in the way. But not anymore. I pressed the cloth smooth, threaded the needle, and started with a corner. It didn't have to be perfect. It just had to be something I made, with my own hands, for someone who would never mistake its meaning. I didn't expect to hear from Sarah so soon, but the very next day after that phone call with Daniela, my landline rang. Not the cell phone, the landline. Only 3 people ever called that number anymore. The pharmacy, my neighbor Leonard, and Sarah. Hi, Grandma, she said softly. Can I come over after school? Of course. I have something I want to show you. She arrived just before 4, hair loose, one shoelace dragging, carrying a shoebox tucked under her arm like a secret. No mention of her parents, no explanation. We sat at the kitchen table. She opened the box carefully, revealing papers, folded notes, and little scraps of construction paper. The kind of treasures only a child would keep. A plastic ring, a dried flower, a tiny stuffed dog the size of a key. But right in the middle was a notebook. Spiral bound, the kind sold in school supply aisles, but the cover was completely covered in stickers. Letters, hearts, stars. I started writing things down, she said, like you do. She showed me page after page, drawings, sentences, stories that didn't quite connect but were beautiful in their honesty. One page just said, "Sometimes Grandma says nothing and I know exactly what she means." Another, "I like that she listens even when I talk too slow." There was one page I hadn't expected. A drawing of a long table with stick figures around it. Most had names, Daddy, Mommy, Aunt Marla, and one figure on the outside with a question mark above her head. "That was your birthday," she said. "You weren't there." I swallowed. "That's me?" She nodded. "Why the question mark?" "Because I didn't know why they left you out. And when I asked, everyone got quiet." I took a breath, steady and slow. "You shouldn't have to ask those questions," I said. She looked at me. "But I do." We sat in silence for a few moments. Then she slid one last paper from the bottom of the box. A note written in her hand, a little messy, but clear. "When I'm big, I want to live with Grandma, because it feels like I can breathe there." That was the moment something in me shifted. Again, not in pain this time, in purpose. "Sarah," I said, "do your parents know you're here?" I said I was going to the library. "And are you supposed to check in?" She looked down. "They don't really ask anymore. I just tell them where I'll be." That stayed with me. After she left, walking back with my extra flashlight because the sun was going down earlier now, I sat in my chair and held that notebook. I remembered something Ryan once told me when he was 10. He'd gotten in a fight at school, nothing serious, just words. And when I asked why he didn't tell the truth, he said, "Because it's easier to keep pretending you're the good guy if nobody hears the bad parts." Maybe that's all this had become. A grown man pretending he was still the good guy, so long as no one else heard the silence he'd left behind. But Sarah was listening. Sarah heard. That night, I wrote a letter. Not to Ryan, not to Daniela, but to Sarah. A real letter on heavy paper with my neatest handwriting. Dear Sarah, you are never invisible to me. You are never too slow, too loud, too much. You are exactly the kind of person I dreamed you'd become. Curious, kind, and strong in all the ways that matter. When you feel small in the world, I hope you remember, you were my reason to speak up. Love, Grandma. I folded it, slipped it into an envelope, and tucked it between the pages of a book I'd been saving for her. Anne of Green Gables, with my annotations in the margins. She wouldn't find it today, but one day she would. And when she did, I wanted her to know that everything I'd done wasn't about turning away. It was about turning toward her, the only one who had never needed me to prove my worth. It didn't take long. 2 days after Sarah's visit, Ryan showed up at my front door. No warning, no text, just a knock, loud, hurried, like he had something to say and had rehearsed all the wrong words. I opened the door without a smile. "Can I come in?" he asked. "That depends," I said. "Is this a visit or a performance?" He blinked. "What? I mean, are you here to see me? Or to tell me how I'm misunderstanding everything?" He didn't answer. I stepped aside anyway. Old habits die hard. He sat in the same chair his father used to sit in when he was about to admit to something. Not guilt exactly, just inconvenience. "Look," he started, "I've been hearing things." I nodded. "You usually do, just not from me." He glanced around. "Sarah's been talking to you a lot?" "She has?" He rubbed his hands together. "She said you told her things about us, about money, about the birthday." "No," I said. I answered her questions. "It's different." Ryan leaned forward. "Mom, you're putting things in her head." I met his eyes. "Ryan, those things are already in her head because she sees, she hears, and because you've made decisions that don't leave room for explanations." He leaned back. "Daniela's furious." "I'm sure she is. She thinks you're trying to turn Sarah against us." "I'm not trying to turn anyone," I said. "I'm just not standing in the corner anymore pretending the room isn't full." His voice rose, defensive. "We've done our best, okay? Raising a family, working full-time, trying to hold things together. We can't be perfect." "I never asked for perfect," I said calmly. "I asked for a seat. At the table. At the ceremony. At the life I helped build." His jaw tightened. "This is about money, isn't it?" That stopped me for a second. The absurdity of it. "You think this is about money?" I asked. "Ryan, I changed your diapers. I buried your father and paid for your first car. I covered tuition when you failed to get your last semester's scholarship. I sold my mother's silver to cover your mortgage's balloon payment that you forgot to mention." He looked away. "I gave because I loved, not because I expected return. But love," I added, "shouldn't require silence to be accepted." He sat there, quiet for once. I let the silence stretch. Then I said it. "I've changed my will." His eyes snapped back to mine. "What?" "I've moved everything into a trust for Sarah. You are no longer my primary heir." He stared at me like I'd slapped him. "You're punishing me." "No," I said. "I'm protecting what matters. You have a house, a job, a family. What you choose to do with them is your decision. But I won't continue feeding a system that pretends I don't exist until it needs a check." His mouth opened, closed again. I stood. "I'd like you to leave now." "Mom? I'm tired, Ryan. And I've spent too many years trading pieces of myself for the hope that you'd look at me the way you used to. That boy, the one who ran home with scraped knees and hugged me without shame, he's gone. and that's okay. But I don't owe this new version of you anything." He rose slowly. "You're making a mistake," he said. "I already made it," I replied. "For the last 15 years. He walked to the door without another word. When it closed behind him, the sound wasn't loud, but it was final. I stood at the window and watched him drive away, tires crunching over fallen leaves. I didn't cry. I boiled water, poured myself tea, pulled out Sarah's quilt in progress and resumed the stitching, corner by corner, square by square. That evening, I wrote again in my notebook. He came not to apologize, but to reclaim. I gave nothing back, and it was the first honest thing I've done in years. The next few days passed without interruption. No phone calls, no knocks at the door, not even a just checking in text from Daniela. It was quiet. And in that quiet, something inside me settled. I found myself humming while I washed dishes. I went to the farmer's market on Thursday and bought myself flowers. Not out of spite, but because the sunflowers reminded me of my mother's kitchen. I finished 2 books. I sewed 4 more squares into Sarah's quilt. I slept without dreams. And then, on Saturday afternoon, Sarah came again. She didn't come with a question this time, or a shoebox, or a secret. She just walked in, kicked off her shoes like she always used to, and said, "I brought pie." It was store-bought, still warm in its plastic container. Apple, overcooked, but it was hers. I set 2 plates on the table, pulled out the good forks. "Is everything okay?" I asked. She nodded. "I just wanted to see you." She didn't mention her parents, neither did I. We talked about her school project, a report on the solar system. She'd picked Saturn because she liked the rings. I told her about the time Ryan made a papier-mâché Mars for the science fair and accidentally glued his hand to the base. She laughed so hard her eyes watered. When she stood to leave, she asked, "Can I take the quilt with me when it's done?" "Of course," I said. "I want to keep it forever." "I made it for that." She hugged me long, not the usual squeeze and go hug. A real one. The kind that stays in your shirt collar afterward. And as she pulled away, she looked up at me and said, "I don't care what they say. I know what love looks like." Then she left. It took me a long time to move after that. I sat with her words, like a warm stone in my lap. Later that night, I turned my phone back on. Not because I missed anything, but because I no longer feared what might be waiting. There were messages, of course. A string from Daniela, ranging from passive concern, "We haven't heard from you," to veiled rebuke, "It's important not to confuse a child," to direct irritation, "This is getting out of hand, Martha." A single voicemail from Ryan. His voice was tired, flatter than usual. "Mom, I don't know what's going on anymore. Sarah's not herself. She's pulling away from us. You've always been good at getting through to her. Maybe you could talk to her. Help us. Please." It was the word please that struck me, but not the way he intended. Please, but not "I'm sorry." Please, but not "I was wrong." Please, only when the silence became inconvenient. I didn't respond. Instead, I wrote a letter, a real one, pen to paper. But it wasn't for Ryan. It was for myself. I wrote, "You did not disappear. You were erased, gently, methodically, with smiles and closed doors, but still erased. And now you are writing yourself back in, one sentence at a time." Then I tucked the letter into the back of my notebook. Some stories don't need to be mailed. They just need to be told and believed. On Sunday, I did something I hadn't done in years. I left town. Nothing dramatic. Just a bus to a nearby village with a small lake, a used bookstore, and a diner that still served pie from metal tins. I packed a small bag, left a note for Leonard in case Sarah came by, and took the 8:10 bus with a paperback in my coat pocket. The lake was quiet. Ducks floating, no music, no people yelling into phones. I walked the whole shoreline, slowly. Not to think. I'd done enough thinking. Just to feel my feet under me, solid and unhurried. At the diner, the waitress called me ma'am and asked if I wanted ice cream with my pie. I said yes. The pie wasn't very good, but I ate every bite. Because I wasn't there to be pleased. I was there to be present. I sat with my tea and watched the window. For a few hours, I didn't belong to anyone. No mother, no widow, no grandmother. Just a woman with a coat and a quiet appetite. Back at the bookstore, I found a hardback edition of Rebecca, with the old jacket still intact. Inside the cover was a name. Eileen Barrington, 1956. I traced the letters with my thumb. Someone else had read this once. Someone who probably thought no one would remember. I bought it. That evening, when I returned home, my mailbox was full. Mostly junk, but one envelope stood out, addressed by hand, no return address. I opened it slowly. Inside was a folded piece of notebook paper, written in Sarah's uneven scrawl. Grandma, I told them I want to live with you someday. Not just visit. They got mad. I didn't care. I know where love is. I know where I can breathe. I love you. Sarah. There were 3 stickers on the bottom. Stars. I read it twice, then a third time, then folded it and placed it gently into the center of her unfinished quilt. I didn't cry. I just sat very still, holding the weight of it. Children don't lie about love. They feel it or they don't. They know when the air is thin and when someone is holding space for them to be their full self. Later that week, Leonard dropped by with a bag of plums. Sarah came looking for you, he said. Told her you were off having a good day. I smiled. Thank you. She's a bright one, he added. She is, I said. Too bright to be left waiting. He didn't ask what I meant. He just nodded, then said, Need anything fixed around here? Not today, I said. Everything's just as it should be. When he left, I went to the hallway and opened the cedar chest. Inside were old photo albums, birthday cards, a wool shawl my mother gave me the year Sarah was born. I added the letter. And I whispered. Not to anyone, just to the air. She chose me. Not because I asked, not because I paid, because I stayed. And that, I was starting to see, was everything. The letter changed something. Not in the house. It looked the same. Quiet walls, ticking clock, a quilt slowly taking shape in the sewing basket. But in me, that one sheet of notebook paper, written in a child's careful hand, said what no adult in my life had said for years. I see you. I choose you. And with that, the air in my lungs got wider. I made no announcements. No social media posts. I didn't set the record straight. I just lived that next week like a woman who didn't need permission. On Wednesday, I went to Sarah's school for their annual fall book sale. No one invited me, but I went. It was open to the public. That's what the sign said. I wore my gray wool coat. The one Daniela once said made me look a bit too much like a substitute librarian. That day, I chose it on purpose. Sarah's eyes lit up the moment she saw me. You came. Of course I did. We walked the rows of tables, flipping through paperbacks and picture books. I bought her a used copy of A Wrinkle in Time and a pencil with a silver moon on the eraser. Daniela was there too, of course. I saw her across the room, standing with the other mothers. Expensive scarves, shiny boots, the quiet hum of judgment. She saw me, and for the first time, I didn't look away. She didn't come over, but Sarah did, several times, smiling, tugging my sleeve, reading aloud a sentence she loved. At one point, a teacher came up, Mrs. Rendell. She had taught Ryan too, back when he was 9 and full of ideas. "Mrs. Henley," she said warmly, "so good to see you." "You too," I said. "I heard you made a donation last year toward the reading garden." I smiled. "Briefly." She laughed. "Well, we're still grateful. Sarah speaks of you often. I speak of her often too." When I left the school, I didn't feel triumphant, just grounded, like someone who'd walked into a room they'd once been asked to leave and found their chair still waiting. That night, I got a message from Ryan. "We need to talk." I didn't answer. He called. I let it ring. Because the thing is, there's no emergency now, no broken pipe, no hospital visit, no urgent need for help. What's happening now is discomfort. The kind that comes when someone finally sees the shape of the space you used to quietly fill. I went to bed early, with Sarah's letter still folded in the pocket of my robe. The next day, I got a small envelope in the mail. Inside was a single photo, an old one. Sarah, at maybe 5 years old, sitting on my lap, frosting on her nose, both of us laughing at something just outside the frame. On the back, in Ryan's handwriting, "I'm sorry. For all of it. No return address. No note. Just that." I sat at the table for a long time, holding that image. It wasn't enough. Not yet. But it was something. Something Sarah would one day need. So I slipped the photo into the same envelope as her letter and added a small note of my own. "This is what love looks like." And I tucked it between the folds of her quilt. The next time I saw Ryan, he didn't knock. He stood in the yard, hands in his jacket pockets just outside the garden gate. I saw him through the kitchen window where I was rinsing teacups. For a minute, I considered pretending I hadn't noticed, but I didn't. I opened the back door, stepped onto the porch. He didn't speak at first, just looked down at the grass like it held the answer. "Hi, Mom." "Ryan?" He exhaled through his nose. "You look well." "I am." Another pause. "I've been thinking," he said. "A lot, actually." I waited. I didn't realize how much space you were holding, not until it was gone. Still, I waited. "I'm not good at this," he said. "I know." He looked up at me then, really looked. I was selfish, not in a loud way, not like on purpose. But I think I started thinking of you as someone who was just always going to be there. Like the lights in a hallway. You don't notice them until it's dark. That image stayed with me. "I didn't try to hurt you," he added. "I just didn't try hard not to." There it was. The truth, or at least his portion of it. "You let Daniela make most of the decisions," I said. "I understand. But you didn't speak when it mattered. You didn't stop her from drawing lines I never crossed." He nodded. "I know. You signed my name to money I earned." He flinched. "I know. You watched your daughter get closer to me, and instead of gratitude, you felt threatened." He blinked. That part I didn't see. Until she started asking us the hard questions. She asked them because no one else would. He nodded again. The wind moved through the trees behind us, shaking down a few last dry leaves. "I'm not asking you to undo everything," he said. "I just want to start again." I studied his face. Still my son, but older. Worn down in ways I had nothing to do with. Life had done its carving, and some of that had nothing to do with me. "You can't start again, Ryan," I said softly. "But you can start forward." He swallowed hard. "What does that mean?" It means I'm not going back to being the woman who waited to be invited. I'm not going back to silent sacrifices." He nodded slowly, like he understood but didn't know what came next. "I'd like to be in Sarah's life," he said. "Properly. With you. Not around you." "That's not my choice," I said. "That's hers. But if she brings you, I won't close the door." He looked relieved, but careful. "She wants to bring you to the school concert next month," he said. "She wants you to sit in the front row." "I will." He shifted on his feet. "And Daniela, she's still adjusting. I imagine she is. She may never, she may not," I said. "And that's all right. I don't need everyone's welcome mat, just space enough to breathe." Another long pause. Then he asked, almost sheepishly, "Is there any pie left?" I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was the most familiar thing he'd said in months. "In the fridge." We sat on the porch steps and ate it cold, straight from the dish, with 2 forks. Just like we used to when he was too old for bedtime, but not quite done being a boy.
He didn't ask about the will. I didn't bring it up. That wasn't what this was for. Later, when he left, I didn't walk him out. I just waved from the porch. He looked back once, gave a small nod, and got in his car. I stayed outside long after the taillights disappeared. Inside, the quilt waited. One more square, and it would be ready. Not finished. No quilt is ever truly finished, but ready to be held, carried, kept. I thought about the photo, the letter, the stories that Sarah would someday unfold like fabric. Not the loud ones, the quiet ones, the kind you don't hear until you're listening close. I picked up my needle and kept sewing. Not because I needed to be remembered, but because I finally knew who I was, even when no one else was looking. The night before the school concert, Sarah called me. She was nervous, not about performing, but about whether I'd be there. "I know you said you're coming," she said, "but I just wanted to make sure." "I'll be there," I said. "Front row." She exhaled, like she'd been holding that breath all week. That same night, I finished the quilt. I laid it out across the bed in the guest room, Sarah's room now, even if only in spirit. All the squares stitched tight, all the seams pressed flat. It wasn't perfect. One corner buckled slightly, and the pattern was off by half an inch where I miscounted. But it was whole, honest, like the life I'd slowly reclaimed. In the morning, I wrapped it in brown paper, tied it with kitchen twine, and tucked a card inside. On it, I wrote only one line. "So you always know where warmth begins." The school auditorium was full by 6. Bright lights, the rustle of programs, the faint smell of floor wax and someone's strong cologne. Parents jostled for seats. Phones were already raised before the curtain lifted. I sat in the front row, as promised. Ryan came in 5 minutes later, holding 2 coffees. He handed me one without a word. We sat side by side, not reconciled, not repaired, but real. Daniela arrived later, took a seat in the second row. We acknowledged each other with small nods. It was enough. And then Sarah came on stage. Blue dress, hair pulled back, that familiar stubborn jaw. She didn't scan the crowd. She looked straight ahead. But I saw the flicker in her eyes when she caught me, even for a second. She sang. She read her line. She played her small part with quiet pride. And when it was over, she ran to me, past the other children, past the teacher trying to organize group photos, and threw her arms around my waist. "You came," she whispered. "I always will." That evening, she opened the package in my kitchen. She ran her fingers over the fabric slowly, reverently. When she saw the card, she held it to her chest like a secret, Can I sleep with it tonight? You can sleep with it every night. She didn't say thank you. She didn't need to. That's the thing about real love. It doesn't ask to be noticed, but it recognizes when it is. Later, after she went home, not by her own choice, not quite yet, I sat in my chair and looked around the room. The same furniture, the same chipped mug, but a different kind of silence. Not empty, just complete. I had not won anything. I hadn't delivered justice. There was no speech, no reckoning, no moment where they begged for my forgiveness. But I had drawn a line, quietly, clearly, and I had held it. I had said, this is who I am. This is what I deserve. This is how I will be treated, or not at all. And someone had heard me. A small someone, but a true one. I don't know what Ryan will do next. Maybe nothing. Maybe he'll drift again, pulled by convenience and comfort. Maybe Daniela will dig in, preserve her version of events, teach Sarah to see me through her own lens. But maybe not, because stories told in silence can be louder than any lecture. And the quilt? It'll stay with Sarah. One day she'll unfold it in a dorm room, or a first apartment, or after a heartbreak, and she'll run her hand across the seam and remember. Someone stitched this for me. Someone stayed. And for you, reading this now, if any part of it felt familiar, if you've ever sat quietly in a room you used to belong in, if your name has ever disappeared from a list where it once lived, know this: you are not gone. You are not forgotten. You are not too late. Start small. Say no. Say yes. Take back the keys you gave away without meaning to. You don't need to fight. You just need to stop shrinking. You matter, even if they act like you don't. And someone, maybe not today, maybe not even this year, someone will look at you the way Sarah looked at me, like you are home. If this story found you at the right time, share it. Leave a comment.